Luke chapter 20. Jesus is in Jerusalem. He has made the trek down through the borders of Galilee and Samaria and to Jericho, and then turned west up the Jericho road. And our last chapter ended with his cleansing of the temple. Chapter 20, verse 1. And it came to pass that on one of those days, as he taught the people in the temple and preached the gospel, the chief priests and the scribes came upon him with elders. Now, the word preached the gospel is a single Greek word beginning evangelizo, from which we get our word evangelize. And in the Greek, it meant I bring good news, and we use that word for evangelize and an evangelist. An evangelist is not in the same position as a pastor looking after a congregation. He is not a teacher necessarily, but he does teach. But the mission of an evangelist is to spread the good news and to bring about converts. 2. And spake unto him, these are the scribes and the chief priests who are religious leaders, and the elders who are leaders in the community. Tell us, by what authority dost thou these things? Who is he that gave thee this authority? Now they are very likely quite upset by that cleansing of the temple when he threw out those who were both buying and selling. And these people want to know where he has gotten his authority. Now, he didn't have a diploma from a school that trains rabbinic priests, and he had no ordination. And they know that. 3. And he answered and said unto them, I will also ask you one thing, and answer me. Jesus uses the very best techniques of argumentation and debate, and he's turned their question back to them. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or from man? Now he has asked a loaded question. They don't dare deny that John's baptizing came from heaven, because the people would spring up against them, and they know that. And they don't dare say that the baptism is of man, because we will learn in verse 6 that all those followers of Jesus will simply stone them. 5. And they reasoned with themselves. They are trying to decide, what do we do? Saying, if we shall say from heaven, he will say, why then you believed ye him not? Why didn't you believe? They did not accept him as a true prophet. 6. But, and if we say of man, all the people will stone us, for they be persuaded that John was a prophet. 7. And they answered that they could not tell whence it was. They don't dare answer, because either direction they go will be a bad choice. 8. And Jesus said unto them, neither I tell you by what authority I do these things. You didn't answer my question? I'm not going to answer yours. You wouldn't believe, or you would haul me in. Whatever I said is what he likely understood. 9. And then he's going to go into a parable. Then he began to speak to the people this parable. A certain man planted a vineyard and let it forth to husbandmen and went into a far country for a long time. Now, Jesus is speaking about himself, and this parable is about the second advent or the second coming of Christ. Now, only Luke includes that phrase for a long time, and it is thought that, like Paul, Luke has an understanding from the Holy Spirit that Jesus will indeed be gone a long time, because after his death, and many were expecting an immediate return in their lifetimes. 10. And at the season he sent a servant to the husbandman that they should give him of the fruit of the vineyard. But the husbandman beat him and sent him away empty. Now, the husbandmen are tenant farmers. Those are persons who work the vineyard and reap the crop for a share of it. It was quite common for vineyards to be let out in kind this way rather than for cash. Now, the servant there are the prophets. That's a prophet. And they beat him and sent him away, and he got no fruit, nothing that was harvested. 11. And again he sent another servant, and they beat him also, and entreated him shamefully, and sent him empty. Now this is the second prophet. We might think of the major prophets and the minor prophets, and most of them were not heard and were killed by the very people that they were sent to warn and to give prophecy. Isaiah prophesied not only the birth of Christ, but also the crucifixion, and none of them were met with a hearing ear amongst the Israelite peoples. 12. And again he sent a third, and they wounded him also and cast him out. This would be John the Baptist. And that word wounded is a Greek word from which we get our word trauma. And that word wounded in that particular, if we take it to the original Greek, that word wounded, wounded is used more than once, but wounded, if we take it back to that particular word that was translated out of the Greek, is related to our word for trauma. And it is found, traumatizo, it is in the Greek, and it is found only here and in the writing about the Good Samaritan who was wounded. And this wounded is more than just being hit. It is a severe and bad injury. And John, of course, was beaten and jailed and eventually beheaded. 13. Then said the Lord of the vineyard, what shall I do? I will send my beloved son. It may be they will reverence him when they see him. And he's speaking of himself. And that beloved son could be translated only. 14. But when the husbandmen saw him, they reasoned among themselves, saying, This is there. Come, let us kill him, that the inheritance may be ours. What a foolish kind of thinking. Let's kill him, and then we'll reap the benefit. how could they possibly inherit as tenant farmers what belonged to the nobleman and then to the heir? 15. So they cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. What therefore shall the Lord of the vineyard do unto them? 16. He shall come and destroy these husbandmen, and shall give the vineyard to others. And when they heard it, they said, God forbid. It means it may not be so. God forbid. And this is not used very often either. Now, the vineyard, of course, represents the nation of Israel. And they, of course, the vineyard will be given to others because they rejected the Messiah. 17. And he beheld them and said, What is this then that is written? The stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner. And he is quoting Psalm 118. This is mentioned also in Psalm 22 and Psalm 110. And the cornerstone is a weight-bearing stone that connects two walls, and it is rejected. 18. Whosoever shall fall upon that stone shall be broken. Falling upon the stone, stumbling block. And that, of course, is prophetic. It's in the prophecies. And falling upon the stone is referring to those persons who will go running after the Antichrist when he is turned loose, thinking that he is the real Jesus instead of the false one. But on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. And this is reminiscent of that passage in the prophets which grinds all those metals, the iron and the silver and the gold, and they're ground into powder, all of them representing nations, and are blown away in the wind. 19. And the chief priest and the scribe that same hour sought to lay hands on him. They would take him in. And they feared the people, for they perceived that he had spoken this parable against them. And he had. They had rejected. They were the religious leaders, and they did not accept John, and they did not accept Jesus, even though all these followers who were there have recognized that indeed he is the Messiah. 20. And they watched him and sent forth spies, which should feign themselves of his word, so that they might deliver him into the power and authority of the governor. Now these spies would have been hired to very carefully watch, and the word feign, taken back to the Greek, is the root from which we get our word hypocrite, and that is play acting. In fact, the word in the Greek was used for actors who wore masks and pretended to be a character in a play. And the governor there, of course, would have been Pilate. Now, the religious leaders could bring forth some kind of a charge, but a death sentence would have required the Roman okay, and that would have come through the governor, who was at the time Pontius Pilate. 21. And they asked him, saying, Master, we know that thou sayest and teachest rightly, neither acceptest thou the person of any, but teachest the way of God truly. Now they're going to try one of Satan's old modus operandi, flattery. They are looking for a weak chink, but they are not aware that this Jesus is divine and perfect, and he doesn't have a weak chink. He will not in the least be susceptible to flattery, just as in the beginning of the book when we learned of the temptations on the mountain, Satan tried to tempt him with promise of power and worship and in the flesh and all these things, hoping to appeal to some human flaw. But he was unable to, just as these persons get nowhere with attempting to be flatterers. 22. Then they're going to take another track. Is it lawful for us to give tribute unto Caesar or no? Now they're asking a civil question. But he perceived their craftiness and said unto them, Why tempt you me? 24. Show me a penny, that would have been a denarius. Whose image and subscription hath it? And they answered and said, Caesar's. And it did. 25. And he said unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar the things which be Caesar, and unto God the things which be God's. All that carnage, that money, belonged to Caesar. So he is telling us in modern day, you may not like it, but when you need to pay your taxes, you will have to pay them because those monies belong to the government. 26. And they could not take hold of his words before the people. They could not comment in front of all this mob of people who were following along with him and who were convinced that he was indeed the promised Messiah. And they held their peace. They didn't dare say a word. Now they're going to give him a domestic issue to think about after they failed on this civil matter. 27. Then came to him certain of the Sadducees, which deny that there is any resurrection, and they ask him. 28. Saying, Master, Moses wrote unto us, if any man's brother die, having a wife, and he die without children, that his brother should take his wife and raise up seed unto his brother. And this is Old Testament law. It's a brother who's left a widow, another brother was to take her to wife, and any child that was born unto that union would be of the seed line of the deceased brother. Now they're going to take this to ridiculous limits. 29. There were therefore 7 brethren, and the first took a wife and died without children, 7 being the number of completeness. 30. And the second took her to wife, and he died childless, 31. And the third took her in the like manner, and the 7 also, and they left no children and died. 32. Last of all, the woman died too. 33. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife of them is she? For 7 had her to wife. And here are these Sadducees asking a resurrection question when they don't even themselves believe in a resurrection. 34, Jesus answered. And Jesus answering said unto them, the children of this world marry and are given in marriage. That's in this earth age, the one we're living in. We are living in the second earth age, and we are given in marriage. 32, 5. But they which shall be accounted worthy to obtain that world and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. That is to say, that next world is the third earth age, the end of this earth age with the second coming of Christ, when all bodies go into glorified bodies, and there then is 1,000-year period of teaching, and then the final judgment. And during that period, he is saying, when we go into a glorified body, there will be no marriage. 36, neither can they die any more, for they are equal unto the angels and are the children of God, being the children of the resurrection. Eternal life, never again to die, and equal to angels and the children of God. And what a wonderful message from Jesus that is. 37. Now that the dead are raised, even Moses showed at the bush when he called the Lord the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. And that word Lord, when we use it referring to God the Father, is Elohim. Is El Shaddai, the God of covenant. And when we use the word God, it's Elohim, and that is the Creator God. 37. Now that the dead are raised, even Moses showed at the, I read that verse 38. For he is not a God of the dead, but of the living, for all live unto him. And that word, all living, everyone is living in a glorified body until the final judgment, as I said, which comes at the end of the millennium, the 1,000-year period in the third earth age. 39. Then certain of the scribes answered and said, Master, thou hast well said. Now the scribes believed in resurrection. 40. And after that they durst not ask him any question at all. He has soundly beaten them down in an argumentation and debate session on a parable and 2 questions about civil and domestic life here on earth and how it takes place later in the kingdom. And he said unto them, he's going to give them a question. How say they that Christ is David's son? 42. And David himself said in the book of Psalms, the Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou on my right hand till I make thine enemies thy footstool. That's Psalm 110. Now, how is Jesus David's son? Physically, he is a descendant of David. His mother Mary, on her father's side, descended from David. His stepfather Joseph descended from heaven. And David himself said, the Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou on my right hand and he is talking about himself. David called him Lord. And how is that? Because he was not only human, he was divine. He was the son of David. He was the Son of God. 44. David therefore calleth him Lord. How is he then his son? Well, they couldn't answer that. 45. Then in the audience of all the people he said unto his disciples, always important to understand to whom he speaks. He is not speaking to the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, or the spies. He is speaking to disciples, whether it be the 12 or the multitude of disciples. 46. Beware of the scribes which desire to walk in long robes, and love greetings in the markets, and the highest seats in the synagogue, and the chief rooms at the feasts. Their robe is stole in the Greek, and we use that word, pronounce it stole. It's a wrap worn by women. These long robes would have been very heavily embellished with a lavish blue fringe along the bottom, very showy. And these persons love to get a wonderful salutation in the market, and they take the chief seats in the synagogue, and they get the best rooms at the feast. Those would have been the 3 major feasts celebrated in the Jewish year: the Passover, the Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles. 47, to end the chapter, still speaking of the scribes, which devour widows' homes, and for a show make long prayers, the same shall receive greater damnation. Now those scribes were the teachers of the law. Now what is it he is saying about them that they will receive a greater damnation? They are using religion as a masquerade. They are pretending, and that is a message to us. That same hypocrite, that same behavior wherein we might be in a church pew every Sunday and every Wednesday evening, and we might be sure to give what we ought, and we might be sure to teach Sunday school or work in the nursery, but we do that not as a sincere Christian and a sincere worker, but to mask an evil life. And Jesus seems to be saying that that is a very great sin. Luke chapter 20. This video is a volunteer outreach of the Essex United Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri. Thank you.